now.
Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Just to provide an update, we did want to, as we had discussed last week, we were able to complete the data collection in Kaka'ako. And this afternoon, we have with us the Partners in Care who provides the data collection, and we wanted to turn it over so that they can provide some insight. Greg Payton, Chair of the Partners in Care, who also was assisted by Jason Espero for the Waikiki Health Center, and Leslie Uehara, Director of Kalihi Health Centers. And with that, Greg, we'll
Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide you with some information. My name is Greg Payton. I'm sort of chairman for the group Partners in Care. Partners in Care is a continuum of care as defined by the HUD-HART Act. Partners in Care is a coalition of 30 nonprofit organizations on Oahu whose collective mission it is to end homelessness on Oahu. As was stated, the survey that we conducted was during the week of August 3rd. And a couple of the groups here that actually provide services in that area, Waikiki Health and Kalihi Health Center, actually provided the outreach to do the surveys in that area. So what we found was there's about 300 people total in the area. Now, you know this is a snapshot in time, so that's about 293 homeless people total. 169 of those folks were single adults, and about 124 people comprised about 31 families in the area. The total was about 300 people. Again, that's a snapshot, it's a moving target. Some of the interesting information that came out of the survey was that about 78% of the people who were surveyed reported that they would be willing to go to shelter. They certainly did not want to be homeless. However, more than 30% of the folks that were surveyed also did not have the necessary, what we call document-ready information. That includes things like a photo ID, which will help you to get housing, and also to get internet coverage in the state. Some of the other interesting information that came out of the survey was that the average income for a single adult was about $320, and the average monthly income for a family household was about $587. As you can see, this is really not enough money to be able to sustain somebody in a household in Hawaii at this time. So that's part of the reason for their homeless situation. Just in summary, what we found was that it seemed like not a new topic, but finding affordable housing units for the folks that are out there is the key thing right now. Being able to provide that level of care. Just one thing to wrap up with. Partners we have for the last couple of years focused on those folks who are most vulnerable in the community, and that would include homeless veterans and people who are chronically homeless for a year or longer. Many of the people in Kaka'ako are people that are more recently homeless and families. So our focus has been for the last couple of years on those who require actually more wraparound services and maybe long-term care for support services. What the surprise was in Kaka'ako is that there's many people who need less wraparound services, need less services to get back on their feet, but that are falling into homeless faster because of the lack of affordable housing. And we have other folks here with me, Jason Espero from Waikiki Health, and Leslie Uehara from Kalihi Health Center if you have questions.
I have a question. In terms of income, is that public assistance or is that work income?
It's a variety of a mixture of those things, yes.
Do you have a breakdown of what's income and what's public assistance?
Majority are public assistance, so either GA or TANF. Some of those who are working cash under the table or just very underemployed, working less than 20 hours a week. That's why their monthly income is so low.
GA is,
General assistance.
thank you.
The 78% that are willing to go into shelters is certainly encouraging, but I believe there's a caveat to that, right? They don't want too many rules. They don't want to be, regulated as far as losing their privacy. Can you talk about that?
Well, so I think a couple of the issues there are like any of us, having some privacy was one of the issues for moving into a shelter. And I think affordable housing would be the key, but shelters can have those drawbacks.
What specific drawbacks did you find, Greg, in the survey of folks who are willing to go into shelter, or Jason, folks who are willing to go into shelters, but they say there's certain situations that would be intolerable to them?
Well, many of the families actually want shelter and especially housing. But unfortunately, such as Next Step or IHS, there's not enough shelter beds for them. I have heard in the past from a few people, some of the reasons why they don't want to go into shelter is perhaps the curfew. Not too many reasons why people don't, more are not enough beds for the families especially.
What is the shortage for beds for families in shelters? I've heard about a waiting list. How long is that at this point?
I can speak for Next Step because Waikiki Health manages that shelter. For a family, it could take anywhere from a month to 2 months for a family household to enter into Next Step. It's based on a first come, first serve. So the process is a family would apply, turn in all their necessary documents. Once that's all completed and turned in, that family's responsibility is to show up or to call to check if there's a family space. And essentially that family can move in when another family moves out. And it's sometimes luck of the draw. And if the day they go in to check in, there's a space, then that family will get it.
What is the turnover rate? How long do they have to wait in between?
For families on average, they're at Next Step for about a year to 14 months. On average total, I did calculations last year. I believe the average stay at Next Step was about 5.5 months.
Of the 87 people, or the 30% without documents, what's the next step for them? Are you going to help them get the documents?
Yep, that's the job of service providers. We'll get them the necessary documents they need, such as a state ID, birth certificate, social security card, and depending what documents they already have, it could take several months for them to obtain their birth certificate, to get their replacement social security card, which takes some time to get in the mail. So once that's completed, our outreach worker or housing specialist will determine which housing resources is most appropriate. And that's determined based on the VI-SPDAT, the VI-SPDAT assessment tool. And that helps prioritize the housing resources or the appropriate level of service that that family or individual could receive.
So Jason, have you identified these without documents? Are they COFA migrants, immigrants?
Well, for those who we surveyed, we learned that about a third or so are COFA migrants. And surprisingly, majority are Hawaiians and Polynesians. So that was something that was new to us. We thought it was the other way around, but in fact it wasn't.
Are you speaking of the people that don't have documents or the people living there in general?
People living there in general,
A third are COFA migrants?
correct.
And then, I'm sorry, can you repeat the rest?
Majority are Native Hawaiians and Polynesians.
What kind of problems do you encounter if someone doesn't have ID to get them into a shelter? Can you talk about that?
Well, a person does not need an ID to get into a shelter. Usually people need IDs for employment and also for their permanent housing application. And the issues that we encounter when we're helping a client apply for permanent housing could be they weren't born in this state. So we have to have them apply for a replacement birth certificate on the East Coast, for example, and that could take anywhere from a month to 3 months. Once we get that birth certificate, we can finally have that person apply, for a social security card. They don't have it. That could take another month to receive the, replacement social security card. And already that could be 4 months that that person is waiting until they actually get document ready. And once they're document ready, we're all simultaneously, we're trying to figure out how can we increase that household's income and also what housing resources are most appropriate for that family or individual.
In case of the 31 families, have you, de-iced to that, or are you gonna prioritize them as being the priority first, or is there a process?
So the VX for that, based on how a person scores, will determine the appropriate housing resource. So in the permanent supportive housing range, a family or individual could qualify for housing first resources, could qualify for shelter plus care, could also qualify for HUD dash resources, all subsidized housing, and also support services, wraparound services included. And the next range is rapid rehousing, and that's more similar to a shallow subsidy, you could say, where a person will get between 1 to 3 months, sometimes up to 6 months of rental assistance. And the other category is mainstream, so just usual care, shelter services, other support services.
Of the 31 families, how many are children? 124 people in 31 families.
Yeah, we are not sure how much were children, but we could get that number.
Okay, are you gonna keep the families together, or are you gonna take the children away?
What do you mean take the children away?
And the Child Protective Services, are they gonna intervene, or what's the process?
From my experiences with CPS, being homeless doesn't constitute having your child be taken away.
How does the data help in terms of the long-term view of the encampment out there? We were waiting for data.
I think we can talk about that. Why don't we have a couple more updates to provide for you, and then we'll take other questions. So the mayor would want to give us an update on the county's activities.
So as you know, we've been talking for quite a long time about Sand Island as a site to house folks, including people from Kakako and other parts of our community. The good news is on Friday, we ordered our contract for the containers that we brought in. And the first containers will be arriving in October, 9 containers, and we'll start to house folks in those containers. They'll be designed in such a way that each person will have their own private unit with a door they can lock, a screen door that they keep open during the hot summer months. It's going to be fully ventilated. It's going to be insulated. The roof is painted with a coating so it reflects the sunlight, and then there is a shade cloth over the roof between the 2 containers, so there's a shaded courtyard, because we're trying to create a village where people can interact with each other instead of feeling isolated. There will be restroom facilities, there will be shower facilities, there will be a community cooking area where people can cook and sit around and talk story with each other. The whole project will be completed before Christmas, and we can house about 85 folks out there, both individuals and couples. We are looking at also bringing in children, but working with our provider, which is IHS. We first want to see that it works and that everyone is safe. And if it is, then we'll invite children into low barriers to entry. So there's not a lot of rules and regulations. There's basic rules, and you can bring a pet, like a dog, so long as it's not dangerous. And you can bring your things and store them with you as long as there's room for you to sleep in the place too. So we're really excited about this. And we look at it not as an end, but the beginning. This is a prototype. If it works, we'll look to do it on other pieces of property, either on our own property or others, because it's not really expensive and it's quicker than having to build your own building. And so that we consider this very good news. Thank you.
And then I did want to ask Chairs Tokuda and Luke to give you an update. They've really been focused on identifying government lands within the urban district in downtown Honolulu and Kaka'ako that has potential for being sites for various shelters and other programs. So, chairs.
So thank you, and you know, what we'd like to do too is definitely commend the governor's administration for really coming together. Last week, we had probably no less than 6 or 7 department heads and different heads of agencies at the table, really getting together to take a look at what lands and facilities were available that we can really start to work with quickly to come up with various shelter options to help shelter the homeless in the areas between Kaka'ako and Mapunapuna. In doing so, people actually willingly started to bring up potential areas that we could start to work on and understand. We're not just looking at one single site. We understand that it has to be a tiered one approach, multiple sites that we start to work in tandem because, quite frankly, there's multiple options that have to be in play for the various individuals that are houseless in our communities, and there's various communities in need as well. One that we actually visited today, as you can tell, we're wearing the same clothes in this picture here. We went this morning, was the HCDA maintenance shed in that particular area. It is very rough, no doubt, but it is a structure that if we are able to quickly start to work on the inside, you have to look at the vision and what could be inside. It could quickly be turned into usable shelter space, potentially for families. We also have a number of different locations that we were looking at today in the Kaka'ako area to increase capacity in terms of being able to house various individuals in the Kaka'ako and surrounding communities. And what's important to note too is with everyone coming to the table, the various departments and agencies, we have already started to identify roughly 3 to 5 different state facilities and lands between Kaka'ako and Mapunapuna that we have been drilling down on for the past few weeks and will continue to do so that we can increase shelter and transition space options for the community. And we'll continue to work very, very hard on that. As was mentioned prior in some of the other press conferences we've done, we have the Liliha Civic Center Ala area that we're also looking at very carefully. We continue to do so. So there are a number of different options. It is Kaka'ako that people talk about, but we also understand that there are a number of communities in need, and we are very much looking at where the state and all of its entities can work together to make sure that we surround our communities with support. So that really has been what we've been working on, and it has been a team effort in the sense that everyone has come together to say, what do we need to do to, again, quickly, efficiently put this in place? Not just the facilities, but even what goes into it in terms of making sure it is ready to accept families and individuals once it's completed.
So, the governor's team that you see here, we actually really work in conjunction with each other. So the city's efforts in doing container units in Salt Lake, Staten Island, is for individuals and couples. So to dovetail that, we'll be looking at sites that will be concentrating on families to house families. The site that Chair Takuda just talked about, this is behind JAPSIM, right in Kaka'ako, and this is something that HCDA identified for us. This facility can house pretty much about 40 people, so we'll be identifying families who could be housed in this facility. What the governor will be doing right away is talking to DAGs to get a team together to fix this facility up for use right away.
And I think what's important to note is that the information, the data that we receive from Partners in Care is really going to help to guide us in terms of the different kinds of sites that we've been able to identify in facilities, as well as also make sure that we better and best utilize the various shelter and bed space that we have out there in the community. Guided with good information, now we're able to pair that up. And as we've mentioned, we have roughly 3 to 5 good, really solid leads in terms of state facilities and buildings between Kaka'ako and Mapunapuna that we are really taking a good hard look at. We have been working hard on that for the last few weeks, and I think we're very hopeful that in the very near future we're going to be able to be able to provide something in terms of additional capacity for our communities. So,
In terms of the HCDA maintenance shed, is there a cost and timeline?
No cost or timeline at this point, but, obviously identifying the parcels and properties are the first step. And I think part of the reason that the chairs are excited about this site is it does have all of the infrastructure, waters, there are currently showers in the facility. So we do know that it was provisioned and can provide bathrooms and showers, in addition to the fact that it is a pretty open space. And when you had asked, how does the data help us? It helps us in a couple ways and helps us focus. One is that we do know that there is virtually zero shelter space for families today. We've gone and we've contacted all of the providers, and essentially all of the family spaces are taken up. And, as Jason had mentioned, there is a wait list for families getting into existing facilities. So that's why, looking for properties and sites that can accommodate families or that we can renovate to accommodate families is a priority. It might not be explicitly a priority in the First Step program per se, but obviously because we now have the data and what the Kaka'ako makeup is, and we know that there is no shelter space for families, it makes it a priority for us. So we are doing a couple things immediately. It's really looking at all of the providers. We do now have an inventory of the vacancies in each one. And we do have the data from Kaka'ako, which allows us to understand where the singles are, what the numbers are. And hopefully we can do a better job of aligning what the vacancies are in all the providers with the people out on the street.
Last week, Governor, you mentioned that you needed the data to get federal money. Is that still true?
No, I mean, the federal money the federal government requires us to run the VDISPAC process to make sure that our efforts to end homelessness are driven by the same data and standards that the federal government is using. So that's more an overall requirement of the program. And as I said, so it just made it easier for us. If we were going to get data on the homelessness in Kaka'ako using that format, just allows us to be consistent and have the same standards to count and get data from the individuals in Kaka'ako.
So has the timetable been changed now? We were all expecting something to happen in August. But given that there's no space for families, has the compassion disruption been?
Well, I mean, we will be working to place as many people as we can in the existing spaces. Again, we definitely know that there is no shelter space for families. So we have a couple of sites that we are looking at that are very promising. And within those sites, the conversations we've been having is how can we, in the quickest way possible, spin up the maintenance shed in Kaka'ako so that we can make it available for families. So those are the things that we are doing right now. During the session, there was an issue about the work crews in public housing, for example. And we do know that we have an agreement with UPW on how we would be able to provide flexibility within civil service to staff up those work crews to get access to public housing. We do know that there are 175 units in public housing today that is off the inventory because they're not in a condition that allows them to be inhabited. So again, looking at all the different assets, working with UPW and trying to spin up the work crews. So the conversation is what resources we have in state and county government with their work crews and our work crews that would allow us to get into a facility like the maintenance shed and renovate it without having to go through the bid processes and all of those kinds of things. That's the things that we're working through and looking at availability of skills and what work needs to be done to get a facility that would allow us to place the families is a high priority.
Governor, the HCDA site, is that definitely going to become a shelter or maybe, or what exactly is the status?
Well, we did meet with HCDA. We do appreciate the support of the board and the executive director over at HCDA. I've asked all of the agencies to really look at their assets, land and buildings and see which ones can be made available. As the chairs had talked about, they did go last week to visit a number of sites. And HCDA had identified this site as well as a number of others. And clearly they are offering to make this site available. So again, we have to go through environmental testing and a number of other things to make sure that it's safe, and then it's really working through how would we renovate the parcel and the facility to be available to take families.
Is that the one on Old and Honey Street?
It's right behind the medical school. It's between the park. There's that big parking lot and park. It's that building that's kind of run down.
Governor, is the old Hilo Hattie site, or I guess they're still occupied there, but the one on Nimitz Highway, is that one of the sites under consideration?
Well, that is one of the sites that we had identified early, and we're working through that process. I know that the city council and the mayor's office have as you know, that site is in bankruptcy, and until those legal issues are settled, it's really not available. But we are looking at a number of sites, and we'll be making decisions about which ones we think we can get ready to accept homeless in the shortest period of time.
Governor, as you're looking for these sites, various sites around, what sort of feedback or safety concerns have you gotten from residents or neighborhood boards who might be concerned that there's a large number, they've got a new site being moved in right into their neighborhood?
Well, so I think part of what we're looking at as a model is really looking for sites throughout the neighborhood. We have been looking at sites focused right now in Honolulu and out to Mapunapuna and Salt Lake area, but we do have a listing of properties out in IAM Pro City as well. So we know that if we can identify sites in each and every community and that the numbers are manageable, then for the most part, the communities are willing to have some kind of transitional temporary facility as long as the behavior of the occupants do not begin to impact on their right to access property and services as well. So
Right,
I think
thank
that's
you,
the objective.
Sorry,
Thank
Governor. Thank you. If you have any additional questions, please see Cindy or me. Thanks.
We'll have the electronic files of the